Coming up on Windows Weekly, Micah Sargent here, subbing in for Leo Laporte. Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell kick off the show talking about Patch Tuesday and the introduction of Outlook to Windows 10. Yes, you've got the new Outlook. Are you happy about it? Probably not. But we talk about, is it change or is it something else? Then we move into the AI discussion about that bid for OpenAI that may or may not have actually been a real thing. Earnings, we got Qualcomm talking about how it's doing, Amazon talking about how it's doing, and Sonos continuing on its downward spiral. Before we round things out with Xbox Corner, as I like to call it, and the tips and picks of the week. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Windows Weekly, episode 919, with Richard Campbell, Paul Thurrott, and me, Micah Sargent. Recorded Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. The supermodel of apps. It's time for Windows Weekly. I am Micah Sargent, subbing in for Leo Laporte this week, who is off chasing crystals for their energy healing properties. As always, we speak to two of the foremost Windows and Microsoft knowers, professionals.
That word? I don't think that's
keep moving forward. That's good.
Just keep
that's
going.
good.
Just keep rolling with it, right?
Yeah.
We are joined, as we usually are, by Paul Thurrott. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Micah.
How you doing?
Pretty bueno.
That's good.
I keep abusing that one. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I like it. We're doing some Spanglish.
I'm trying to work it into the local language here.
He's been in Mexico City for a few weeks now.
Partial success.
Yeah.
And you're also hearing the dulcet tones of Richard Campbell, who is joining us with his best friend, a bottle of Dayquil. How you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm after a month on the road, including a good week with the Thurrotts in Puerto Vallarta. I come home to immediately get the flu, but it's better than having the flu in a hotel. So,
I would be sick all the time.
You know what they say: if you don't take anything, you'll suffer for a week, but if you take all the meds, you'll get over it in about 7 days.
I like that. I'm going to use that. I'd never heard that before.
Nice.
That's a good one.
It's just a quality of life thing. Better living through chemistry.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. I really like Theraflu, which is that stuff you
It's
mix
good
with
stuff,
hot water.
yeah.
Oh, and I introduced some friends who ended up with influenza A as well to it. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is keeping me alive right now. But yeah, still lasts about the same amount of time, but good enough in any case. Well, I'm glad that you're here, right? And that you are aware enough to join us for the show. We appreciate it.
And I'm home, so the view is epic. Like, don't feel too bad for me.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, my goodness. Do you go fishing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. There's cod and salmon out there and Dungeness crab and spot
come
prawns,
on. I'm going to come visit.
Oh, you're welcome anytime, Micah. You know you are.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
All right. Well, I do want to say that I'm looking forward to kicking things off this week for Windows Weekly, as is typical for the show. We got to start with Windows and where things are. Patch Tuesday is well underway, and
let me disavow you of that positivity.
Of course, I mean that's your role here, right? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago we talked about the preview update that was the predicator to predicator. Jeez, I'm inventing words.
We're all making new words.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move forward. To yesterday's Patch Tuesday updates for Windows 11. So Windows 11 23 and 24H2 basically got the same updates. There's a couple of things that are 23H2 specific for some reason. Well, mostly because they're probably already in 24H2, I guess. I can tell you, looking at this list, I haven't seen one of these. I only have, I guess, 5 Windows computers here, but I
only.
Well, I usually have more. I mean, I usually have more of a representative, collection. But I have not seen a single one of these improvements. So a lot of the things that Microsoft adds to Windows these days are on what's called a CFR, a controlled feature release. So they roll out gradually. In fact, I keep doing this. I'm going to check again. I keep waiting. I'm especially looking forward to semantic search on my dev box, but that's not this one anyway, so I'm not going to see that. I'm not sure why I looked at it. Anywho, so for main, stable people, unstable, you will can look forward to, may have some of these things. Improved taskbar preview. So when you mouse over an icon in the taskbar for an app that has an open window, the preview that appears will be improved in some way that I cannot describe because I've never seen it. When you are accessing your camera on a AI PC or Copilot Plus PC, and you have Windows Studio Effects, you'll get a central control panel for that in button form on the taskbar, so you can just access those features more easily. Previously, and actually today still, those things are available in quick settings, and then sometimes in the app, depending on the app. Vague file explorer rather, improvements, including such things as creating a new folder through the right-click context menu. Actually, okay, excuse me. I have seen one of these updates. It is this one, mouse improvements. What does that mean? Well, one of the fun new features in 24H2 was that the mouse cursor would disappear all the time. That drove me so insane that I have been using that power toy that we discussed last week. Right, that
puts a halo around the mouse.
Yeah, you double taps control. It does that little, animation. You can see the mouse cursor. So I started using that because in 24H2, it would just disappear all the time. It was driving me insane.
That is annoying.
Crazy. They added the ability to change the time zone if you're set up as a standard user as opposed to someone with administrative privileges, which, okay.
Took you long enough.
I know. There's a OneDrive continuity feature if you're working in OneDrive on your phone and you're on whatever document or whatever the file is, and then you return to your PC, log in with the same account. It will say, hey, did you want to keep working on that thing again? Kind of a minor Apple-like feature. Some additional sharing features in Windows Share, which actually that interface has evolved a lot since they first introduced it in Windows 8, but it's evolved a lot even just in Windows 11. So I can't remember if I did this already, but someday soon, if I haven't already done it, there'll be a hands-on Windows episode about that because it's weird how much it's changed. And then some new keyboard shortcut inside of the Magnifier accessibility app if you use that. So none of it is major, I would say, but except for the mouse thing, which is awesome. Yeah. And then if you're in Windows 10, you get the new Outlook. Yay! I don't have a way to drop confetti on top of myself right now, but I would if I could. So that the old mail calendar and people apps all went out of support as of the end of December. So now they're pushing Outlook on everybody because everybody loves it.
Sorry, is that classic Paul sarcasm?
Yeah, that was no sarcasm. Everyone hates it.
Sure. Is it because it's just change, or is it legitimately bad?
It's actually, Richard, I'll let you maybe opine on that briefly.
It is change. I think it's change.
Yeah.
Because the good news is the regular Outlook has been updated in a way that starts to annoy you a lot too. They pop up calendars you can't click on and things like that. So by making the old standby also annoying, it makes you more comfortable to be annoyed by the new one.
Yeah. I think it's overdue. I hear there are a lot of complaints. A lot of it has to do with old school guys.
The problem is you have Outlook reflexes that are a decade old, and these Outlook reflexes are different. Yeah. So my friend Paul Thurrott convinced me to set it up on this machine. Convinced me, just mentioned enough times. I'm fine. I'm switching to it.
I was gonna say, I didn't really push you on it, but
then I believe I cursed you about it for a little while. And then about 2 weeks later, I said, listen, I've stopped noticing that I'm using the new Outlook. I'm just using it. So it's doing the things I'm supposed to do. It's not getting my way.
It's just proof that you can get used to anything.
Yeah. You talk to the folks in war zones who just get used to explosions overhead, right?
Right. You hear the bomb come in, you lift up the teacup for a second, it hits, you put it back down, you're fine. It's just whatever. So it's not that bad. I don't know. I don't use an app. I use just the web apps for things like this, but I think it's fine. Every time I use it, I'm like, I don't understand what the complaints are. It's fine. But anyway, you can rest assured that
you've also got better reflexes for learning new software than most humans, Paul, right? Like you do it so often.
Yep.
Where, the average info worker has been using the same suite for quite a long time, and Outlook is their sovereign app. It's the first thing they open. It's how they organize their day. Unless they're
I get it. But the one of the stories I've told on this podcast a lot and elsewhere in writing is that thing about the pre-con session at Tech Ed the year. The cloud computing was starting to happen, and it's the exchange administrator guy. Like he's like, you mean to tell me that my final act as an exchange administrator for this company will be to hand over the reins of this thing to Microsoft because we're going to put it in at the time Office 365, and that is the answer. The answer is yes. And you got stuck.
Still need an administrator to manage Outlook online.
You may still have a role, but online. The fact is, in that case, your company makes whatever they make, widgets or something. Mm-hmm. They're not an email company. They didn't mean to have 50 people managing these things, and it turns out, things have evolved. There's a better way to do this, cost effective, et cetera, et cetera. So we're moving on, and I think people who enter our industry when they're younger, especially, do so knowing, it's all about change. Things change, and they're cool with change. They're cool with change, and then they're not cool with change. Yeah. And at some point, you're in a position where you're the decision maker, and you're not going to make a good decision or the right decision for your company because now you're worried about your job. For example, and I completely understand that. But the other version of this is I just started writing something about this, but I see this with AI. People, it's the same crowd. It's the same people who hate Outlook, really, right? The old school guys, right? I'm never using AI. I hate AI. I've never seen a good use of AI. This all it does is make garbage, and it's like, okay, so you've already said 8 things that are wrong, and what are you doing, But there are guys who want to take a wrench and strip Copilot out of whatever Microsoft apps you're using or whatever it is. And it's like, guys, listen, I get it. This is happening really fast. It's happening even faster than things usually happen. I get it. And maybe you're late stage in your career, whatever. But this is, complaining about AI in Word or Excel or whatever is like complaining about spell checking or auto format or whatever the other tools are that make your life easier. And it's like we've kind of lost track of what it is we're doing here, and it bugs me when people especially people who are highly technical and experienced, just kind of dig their heels in. This is where I draw the line, and it's like, okay, well, the rest of the world's moving on.
And AI admittedly is steeped in science fiction that adds additional layers.
I think that the speed doesn't help. It's so fast. And, we're going to talk about some of this later too, but this is like, the less speedy version of this is another story I've told a billion times about my friend's wife who I hadn't seen in a while, and pull out my laptop and it's a ThinkPad or whatever. And she goes, "Oh, I stopped using Windows because it's so buggy and crappy. I use a Mac now or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "How long ago was that?" And she's like, 7 years ago. I'm like, "Well, your opinion stinks." Maybe that was true. I'm like, it's, maybe that was true 7 years ago. I don't know. I love you, but no,
things change.
So condense the time frame, and I think that's what's happening with AI. I think and I get this on social media all the time. I get it in email, I get it in the comments, whatever. It'll be like some guys like, "Oh, I went to name the service, and I typed in whatever I typed in, and it came up with garbage. AI sucks." And you're like, okay. So I think it needs a little more testing than that. And also, was that 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago or half a year ago? When was that? Because
wait, was that yesterday?
Yeah, because if it wasn't 2 seconds ago, I'm not really sure what you're talking about.
You missed it. There's a new version.
Yeah, it's moving quick.
It's also
so. Yeah. So anyway, that was a long story about the new Outlook, but it's something I struggle with. I'm trying. It's just like a wall of negativity that I'm trying to deal with. I'm trying to be rational about it, but there's something vaguely troubling about people who I feel should know better. Just nope, this is where I'm done. This is it. I'm done. Yeah. Word processors, as they were in 1997, were the end of the line. It's like, okay.
Got it nailed. My WordPerfect 4.3, I need nothing more.
Yeah. There's no one on this earth.
Hijack us over on the administrator side, but this Patch Tuesday was a big one for sysadmins.
Okay, talk to me.
They for the past 4 years, since 2022, or 3 years, since 2022, there was a major update. It's KB 501-4754. For those
love that you know this number. Yep.
I have it in front of me because I've been hearing about it.
Speaking of ADHD, no, but go ahead.
Yeah, but it was about strong authentication for certificates internally to Active Directory.
Oh,
and again, we make fun of Microsoft a lot because they do dumb things. But I want you to see how cleverly they have managed this particular problem. So they want to improve. If you're going to run certificates for authentication in Active Directory. They want you to do it the right way. They used to be pretty loosey-goosey about the whole thing, just to allow people to work, but it's a security risk. And it's for laterals. So somebody gets breached through an email phish, they can lateral into administrative privileges with a weak certificate of authority through Active Directory. It's a big deal. Now,
this might literally have played a role in the hack of Microsoft.
100%. Absolutely.
A year ago, whatever. Yeah.
So they've given us plenty of warning, couple of years worth of time to say, look, there's a D-Day, and the D-Day is February 11th, 2025, which also happens to be my 30th wedding anniversary, but that's a separate issue.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the way they did this is that basically Patch Tuesday pushes on to all versions of server, requires strong authentication for certificates. So what it really means is your Active Directory infrastructure will stop authenticating if you're using certs. Now, you can fix it. You could A, set up your PKI properly and actually get strong certificates working and everything is fine. Or B, you can go into the registry for each of your ADs and put yourself back into compatibility mode, which will last until September, when it'll stop looking at the compatibility flag.
Okay. So this is your time frame.
Now, admittedly, they've been talking about this literally for 2.5 years. So many sysadmins I know still had a stressful day yesterday because it was like, okay, I'm rolling this patch out. Let's find out if I've done this right.
Yep.
And for some they had, and some they hadn't. And then your option then is to go in and run around and do reg edits to flip into compatibility mode to figure it out, because now you have a few months. But the main thing that Microsoft's addressing, which is the most common problem of them all, is that nobody's paying attention to their Active Directory infrastructure at all. And so
I'm surprised
yesterday was a
Active Directory
firestorm.
Still exists. No, I'm joking.
Well, and folks would like you to, Microsoft would like you to use Entra. They make more money that way, but it's not that simple. And you would, again, have to pay attention to your infrastructure. So it was...
Are you suggesting Entra and Active Directory are not exactly the same thing, Richard?
They're vaguely related.
Sure.
But yeah, there's some things going on there. Anyway, it was yesterday for me, besides recording a few .NET Rocks, it was mostly bantering back and forth with many of the administrators that know me well from Run As and are just going, well, I did this whole thing and I just don't know if it's going to fail. I got to keep watching for people to authenticate as these patches roll over. But and then others going, no, I'm literally RDPing into each machine and doing your reg edit, each of the servers.
Bert quoted your, we make fun of Microsoft because they do dumb things thing. Yes. And it reminded me of, I don't, like most people, I don't usually confront people in public. I prefer to do it on Twitter or whatever. But every once in a while, you get that opportunity, like in person, to finally tell someone, how you feel about them. And I won't say who this was. It's someone who does something like I do. And she said, I don't understand why you're so mean to me. And I said, I can explain it. It's because you're terrible. So
that's amazing that you just said that.
Yeah. I haven't talked to her since. Anyway, so tied somewhat to what Richard just mentioned about commercial customers being impacted by this Patch Tuesday, Microsoft announced this past week, it didn't go out on Patch Tuesday, but sometime in the first half of the year, they're going to allow those with managed businesses configure whether or not the Windows 11 24H2 or more recent, I guess, out-of-box experience in Windows setup, or not displays, but rather downloads the latest cumulative update, which requires some discussion in a sense, because most of you are saying, but it does do that, doesn't it? Already, like, doesn't it already? This is like a new thing in 24H2. So, depending on the type of install you're doing, there are up to 3 different times where you could check for updates, right? And in Windows 11 24H2, which I first experienced with the Copilot Plus PCs in mid-year last year, there's a new phase, and you'll notice it if you're familiar with Windows setup and how it looks in Windows 11 with white background, pastel colors, etc. It drops into a new look and feel where you can see what's going to be the desktop kind of bleeding through. It has a different look to it. I have a shot of it in the article that is associated with this, but it was the first time I'd seen it, and the first time I experienced it was literally because Microsoft had at the time delayed recall, and they basically put a whole new version of Windows. and required anyone who brought up a Copilot Plus PC that month or in the ensuing probably 30 to 60 days install a full feature update, which took a long time. The average install time for this regardless is about 20 minutes. Now, the way this works, generally speaking, is that if you're an individual, you're going to install that thing one way or the other, right? So you could go through Windows setup more quickly, I guess, and skip it if they let you, and then get into Windows, and then you could just go to Windows Update like people do and check for updates. And sure enough, there's that cumulative update. It's the most recent monthly update, right? We have the point of cumulative updates is that whatever that month's update is includes everything from the past, 12 updates or whatever it is. So they're going to let businesses skip that. They're not going to have to go through that additional 20 minutes, basically. But, and of course, it's up to them when they install updates to some degree. Since they are creating a policy for that, I suppose individuals will figure out how to do that for themselves as well, right? So people make custom installs and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, for most people, it's not a great experience. We all have this, you buy something new, you can't wait to try it, and you got to wait because there are updates. Like everything does this, right?
Yep.
Windows arguably invented that, or at least perfected it, but whatever. It's gotten even worse, I guess, or better, depending on your outlook in 24H2. So they are going to let businesses say no to that. I think it's funny the way Microsoft described it, because they, instead of saying we're going to allow you to turn it off, they said we're going to allow you to turn it on. It's actually on by default. So they're sort of saying like, we're going to allow you to keep using it the way we intended, or you can just turn it off, which, I think a lot of them are going to do. So, okay. Let's see. You were gone last week, so I was going to ask you.
I wish I wasn't, but I was.
Do you remember if we talked about, well, you were gone. So Microsoft has various channels in the Windows Insider program. So if you're in Windows 11, there's a Canary, which no one can understand. There's Dev, which as of today is still on 24H2 updates. There is Beta, which as of today is still on 23H2. And then there's the release preview program, which can actually have a build for any supported version of Windows, right? So before the preview update went out for both versions of Windows 11 yesterday, the release preview channel ejected this similar build about a week earlier, whatever. Okay, so that's where we're at. But, nothing can be simple. So we're in a little bit of a window here where if you're in the dev or beta channels, you can switch into the other right now if you want to. And the reason is dev is going to move on to whatever the next thing is. They haven't said it, but 25H2.
25H2, right?
Whatever.
Dev is supposed to be the closest, the rawest code.
Yeah.
Right?
So
discounted Canary because we just don't know.
Because everyone discounts Canary because nobody understands it. Yep. Yep. I'm sure the Canary build will soon get the new Outlook. Just to give you an idea of how
the next most mature.
Yeah. Right. So beta right now is on 23H2. But you have the option, if you want to check for updates, and you'll get the same build that's in dev. And you can, if you accept that, you'll move into 24H2 testing, right? So they're shifting things a little bit. So we're just in the middle of that. So there was a new beta build yesterday. And if you weren't confused yet, you'll enjoy this sentence. That was for people who never opted into 24H2. So it's still on 23H2, which is one of the two current versions of Windows 11, but not the most recent version. Does that make sense? Good.
Yeah.
So in 24H2, you will already have seen, I think, actually, let me look right here because I'm not actually, I have trouble remembering what's where. No, I don't see it on this one. Okay. So certainly on a Copilot Plus PC, if you have, well, you will have 24H2, right? They all do. You'll see the new version of Paint, which we did discuss last week. And there is, or soon will be, a Hands-on Windows episode about. And that new version has a Copilot button, which I know everyone loves, so no complaints. And all of the AI functionality, well, 4 of the 5 new AI features that are in the app are in this pull-down menu. Some of them are Copilot Plus PC only, like Co-Create and the new generative fill and erase. I only see 2 of those 3 things on the one PC I have like that here now. And then the other 2 are available to everyone. That's the, see if I can figure this out, image creation and background removal, right? Those don't require an NPU, whatever. For some reason, they work with everybody. Those things are commingled in one menu. They're not actually in order. They're not marked in any way. It's hilarious, but that's the new app. Honestly, it's a good idea because we've reached this point where we don't really have a place in the ribbon to put entire buttons or whatever. So now we have a button with a menu. So that was a lot of talk for a really innocuous new feature in one app because there were no other new features in that build. But anyway, if you're in the beta channel, did not go to 24H2, you have 23H2, check for updates. You can get the new Paint app. Have fun with that. More excitingly, whatever, MIDI is making a comeback of sorts.
Really?
I remember seeing a band I swear to God, this was the late 1990s. I know this doesn't sound possible, but they had an Atari ST on stage specifically because it came with, MIDI ports.
Built in the back, yeah.
Yeah.
Atari ST.
And that thing had been, not supported or not a thing for at least a decade.
5-pin DIN connectors, man.
Yeah.
It's old school.
So I guess Windows has just been using this USB MIDI something driver, whatever, since forever. We just made fun of the Canary channel, but actually there's a new MIDI 2.0 standard, and the initial support for that through Windows MIDI Services is now available in the Canary channel for these 6 or fewer people that are interested in
both
MIDI
people
today.
are really excited about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
unfortunately,
MIDI is a serial standard, so USB is universal serial bus, right?
That's right.
They all do. They are friendly to each other. Carl will be excited about this.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe you have a legacy device of some kind. You're probably using a Mac, but whatever. You know what? It's fine. They're doing it. Okay. I don't think I don't think this is going to impact too many people, but you didn't look. No one expected to see the word MIDI appear today, so let's just embrace it for what it is. And then again, kind of outside of whatever channels we're talking about, Microsoft is updating the Photos app similarly to what they're doing in the Paint app with a bunch of new AI capabilities. And that same Hands on Windows episode I keep referencing for some reason also features that stuff. So they're doing things a little differently. There's designer integration, which I believe we talked about last week. There's some stuff that's been in that app for probably a year or more now. And then there's some new stuff that Microsoft announced, I don't know, October last year, whatever, that's kind of finally starting to roll out in the app. In fact, because I keep doing this, I'm just going to look at it. This is just a normal PC. It's not a Copilot plus PC. So I'm curious what weird subset of features this thing has. Let me open this thing. And so it has the designer integration, which gives you like an inline Microsoft designer experience. So you don't have to go to the website with it. You don't have to round robin a file if you're using it for design purposes. That's actually pretty cool. And then if you go into the editing features, this is like a minor, it's got some stuff. So generative erase, that wasn't there before. That was a generative background erase is part of Paint. It has been for a while, but actual generative erase, meaning you can select the things you want to erase. So that's in this version. That's actually pretty good. And then the background features, background blur, remove, and replace. That's been in Photos for a while. And then if you have a Copilot plus PC, you get additional features. So one of the features that should have been in Paint by now on Copilot plus PCs is OCR capabilities with like support for 160 different languages. And they were testing it. It was about to come out, and then they pulled it, Microsoft, and never explained why. But now it's back. So if you have an image that has any text in it, you can do the thing you do today and say, snipping tool does this. And I think there are other
I ran
things.
across somebody asking about OCR yesterday too. And somebody said, like, just paste it into ChatGPT and say, what does this text say?
Yeah, that works too. But if you're using Windows and you want to right click a file and what's the text and get that text, copy to the clipboard, snipping tool works great. I think everyone has that. And it's there now, but they're adding it to, they're adding it everywhere it makes sense, right? So if the app has anything to do with images, they're going to add that capability. So
that's nice, right? That you don't have to leave the context. That's the big thing.
Right.
Because
So
I agree that having it in other places is easy, but there, because that came to Mac OS pretty late in the game. We only recently got that. Yeah, you can even pause a video, and if there's text in the video, you could highlight it and copy it and paste it somewhere. It's just nice to have it in that context.
I keep forgetting where I say things, right? So either in Windows Weekly, possibly when Richard was gone last week, and or in Hands on Windows, we have talked about certainly, this feature that was originally part of Recall, but now will be made more broadly just in Windows if you have a Copilot Plus PC, which is called Click to Do, which when you hear the name, you're like, oh, that's a stupid name. But actually the way it works is you hold down the Windows key and you click. And whatever that window is, it does the AI purple and pink ripple and it examines the thing. And if it is a graphic, it will look to identify the objects that are in there. And if there's text in the graphic, it will do this OCR thing. And if it's text, it will highlight all the text. And then you can do things like copy to the clipboard, obviously, but rewrite the text, make it more professional, more casual, shorter, longer. You can turn it into a poem, which is hilarious. It's pretty cool. But the reason that's a neat feature, despite the name that's still slightly grating to me, is that it's app agnostic, right? So you have like putting features where they make sense in context, like Micah said, makes sense. If you're going to have OCR capabilities for images, yes. Photos, paint, snipping tool, yep, makes sense. But having something that works with any app, because maybe use a third-party app or maybe use whatever it is. Maybe it's a graphic on a website. Maybe it's a graphic in a Word document, whatever it is. You can do it to anything. And like having it out at the OS level, like Click to Do does, actually is pretty cool. So it's text and graphics, as you would expect, text and images. Yeah. So, I just went on, not a rant, but my kind of pet peeve of the day about AI and people kind of denying it or hating it or not wanting it. But this is maybe a good everyday example of it's just kind of there, doesn't get in your way, doesn't bother you. If you need it, there it is. If you don't, you just get on with your life, right? And so, yeah, okay, maybe AI is not improving your life, but actually, this is a really nice, useful, efficiency, whatever you want to call it, feature. It's great. So, yes, it's happening all over the place, with or without you, by the way. So, welcome to the future. And then welcome to the past, because yesterday, I want you guys to imagine that Microsoft is going to announce that they have canceled HoloLens, that they're never going to do anything with this technology ever again. But here's the trick. You can't use the word HoloLens in that announcement. Now, what I just said is not necessarily strictly true, but there is the HoloLens variant that Microsoft made for the U.S. Army, which I think most would agree has been kind of keeping HoloLens alive as a product in a way. It's the big
and also
contract.
Crippled them too, because the Army wanted so many things.
It's super specialized and yep. So what Microsoft did was partner with a company called Anduril, which is fascinating to me because for some reason this company has come up in my tech feed a couple of times in the past 2 weeks, and I've wondered about it because Anduril, of course, is the name of Aragorn's sword in The Lord of the Rings. I'm a nerd like all of you.
Right.
And, they reforge it and whatever. So,
but they are a proper military contractor.
Yeah. Proper in the sense that they absolutely have contracts with the various parts of the military to the tune of hundreds of millions to several billions of dollars each. So they make drones and sensors.
They're a drone company. Yeah.
Yep. This is Palmer Luckey, who previously founded Oculus, right? Mm-hmm. Which sold to Facebook or Meta, whatever it was called at the time. He left there under mysterious and definitely negative circumstances. If you look this guy up, he is so comically a tech bro that it's impossible not to make fun of him. I'm going to try hard.
He's in his 30s, for God's sake.
Yeah, it's crazy. So the partnership is Microsoft doesn't have to deal with this anymore, but they will be the preferred, not the exclusive, by the way, but the preferred cloud service for this stuff. So Azure will still be part of it. So this is a way for Microsoft to kind of wipe their hands of the HoloLens thing, but still get some business on the back end, perhaps.
There's still other verticals that are using HoloLens. So the question is, where are they going to live? They've obviously the Army was not happy with the circumstances, so they fixed the Army problem. But now you have the other verticals.
Yeah, HoloLens was last updated as a hardware device in 2019. So it was almost exactly 6 years ago, right? I went to that. It was a Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Tim Sweeney was on stage, and they kumbaya the hell out of that. It was great. Microsoft was going to come up with the HoloLens 3. It wasn't enough of a leap. They ended up not doing it. I was actually with Brad in Las Vegas when he got the phone call from a buddy of his at Microsoft who told him the story, which was kind of interesting as it was happening. But
apparently they got to prototype and said no.
Yeah, it just wasn't enough. enough of a move forward. So I feel like this world has kind of moved on. Obviously, not HoloLens necessarily, which is AR, but there are mixed reality, VR, XR, whatever you want to call these things, solutions from a variety of companies. Microsoft supports, I think, all of them actually. Like so, Apple with Vision Pro, Android is coming, or Google/Android is coming out with Android XR soon in partnership with Samsung, but for everybody. And what's the other? Oh, of course, Meta with Oculus and their stuff. So I don't know. They laid off most of that mixed reality team mid-year last year, as I recall. I don't know. I don't really see a huge future here, obviously, but HoloLens is one of the remaining pieces of what we used to call that one Windows thing, right? Where you could create a universal Windows app that theoretically could run on HoloLens, Surface Hub, Xbox, Windows across PCs, tablets, and phones, and that whole IoT, blah, 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 whatever. So most of that's been kind of dismantled.
Kipman was encouraged to depart in 2022.
I'm encouraging you to do the right thing, and because otherwise,
it was him and Scott Keen, and there was a few. There was sort of a sweep of executive level, misconduct moves all at once, and he was in that.
Yes,
so they've been leaderless effectively. I mean, I know some of the folks that were still working on that, and they were very much waiting for new hardware. This thing's is in stasis.
This feels like the type of thing where I don't know if you know this, Richard, but maybe they're probably still part of the Windows org, or at least the more personal computing org, certainly. And I'm sure from their perspective, it's like, is there some way you could go to this other thing or something? Could we get rid of it? Could we just not do this anymore? So I don't know.
I mean, I think it makes sense in the sense that right now we, look at how much focus they've put on AI related technologies. And, I've heard a whole org saying, if you don't have AI in your workload, you're in the wrong team.
That's right.
And not that I don't think that augmented reality couldn't benefit from a bunch of these generative AI technologies, but
but this is platform building. I mean, this is
not a time to be building a platform. So it's not a bad time to sort of put this on the shelf for a while. Keep a couple of smart hardware people around so that they're at the right conferences and seeing when the new chipset's coming down, and can propose at least, hey, this might be a good time to move.
I think. Well, the other thing Satya Nadella, obviously, his time at Microsoft, his time as CEO at Microsoft will be marked by first the cloud, now AI. That's probably going to be the extent of it, but whatever, that's the era. But the other thing he's really known for is this now very common thing at Microsoft, where Microsoft is going to meet their customers where they are, right? And so when you look at AR, MR, XR, whatever we're going to call this stuff, where customers are is increasingly the Meta stuff, maybe the Apple stuff, maybe this Android thing will take off, who knows? And that's where you go and say, we can make a difference with AI, where we'll support the users on those products, and then we don't have to worry about the terribleness of building that platform or whatever. We'll just support the platforms that are out in the world.
Well, Microsoft's wins have never come from original hardware.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I understand the Surface line in terms of building reference gear, and most of the cases when you talk about the good mice and the good keyboards, it was about building reference gear. It's like, hey, this stuff could be good, and it's perfectly fine to make a small lot product that is expensive and is good for certain customers, but it sets a bar for the rest of the ecosystem to build underneath or to attempt to exceed.
Yeah, I mean, I was at it was the event at which they launched Surface Duo, which was that little, the 2-screen Android thing.
Yep.
And I think it's fair to say I was on the negative end of the spectrum on that one. It didn't make sense to me at the time. Samsung had already done at least 2 generations of a folding phone. It was like, what are you doing? You're
a little late. Yeah.
And Frank Shaw said,
an Android phone anyway.
Yeah. But Frank Shaw said to me, he says, let me just ask you theoretically, like, if we can make a small business out of this and it's profitable, I mean, is that okay with you? I was like, yeah, that's fine. Of course. But it's the profitable thing. I'm not really, of course that would be fantastic. Is that what you're doing? Like, we never got to that part of the conversation. So I'm not ripping on Frank, but it's a fair point like that he made, which is, that's fine. But I think the problem is these businesses, which I would argue maybe are a bit of a distraction today because of the company's focus, like you said, with AR and okay.
Well, and at the same time, like Kipman's legacy, like the original Surface, before it was a laptop, it was a table. Do you remember this thing?
Yeah, of course.
Right?
I've
a
seen
table
it, yeah.
you could not show on stage because it was optically controlled and stage lights would screw it up every time.
That's right. It was looked like a Pac-Man machine from like
it was
roller
literally
rink
the same form factor as the old Pac-Man machine. But he parlayed that into that the Xbox accessory, right? Do you remember the gizmo that sat on top that could do the Kinect and do frame recognition? And that was going to revolutionize Xbox, and not enough people bought it, and it
did great at first, and then it couldn't see people if their skin was anything other than lily white, which was kind of a problem.
Oh, there's some great stories from the Kinect story. Like I remember at one point they had to send out an email saying, please, because they had all these beta testers that were Microsoft employees, please do not beta test this thing naked, because we do have to look.
We're literally doing body scans. Yeah.
Because it was in testing, right?
You don't actually see this in real life, but when they do the demo of how it mapped the room, the Kinect, they would use like that matrix dots that would kind of go over and around, right? And so that effect actually figures prominently, if I remember correctly. I think it was a Paranormal Activity movie where the Kinect was making those green dots everywhere, and like I don't remember exactly how they did, but like something moved through the room and it detected the mass of the thing,
right?
But it was a flash in the pan, but it was briefly very successful, and then they decided it was going to be a requirement.
Briefly exciting. I don't think it was ever successful, because you couldn't.
Yeah.
The real question is, can you make a game with this interface that people care about? And now we get back to the gaming problem, where the amount of money it takes to make a good game on that,
right?
I think
that. This is not a Microsoft problem, but I think there's a problem when you, as a tech company in this case, have this. You come up with like what is essentially a tech demo. Like HoloLens was like this.
Yeah.
And the reason HoloLens became a product was because they had this tech demo, and Satya Nadella became the CEO, and he saw that and he said, "Make something," you know. And I think Kinect was like that, where they're like, "Okay, this is crazy. Let's productize it." And so they take this risk. They spend, it's hardware too in both cases, right? So it's a huge investment. You're never going to get it right in V1. So you hope, as we move down the road, and HoloLens got a lot better in V2 for sure, like field of view and so forth. But a lot of times those, like the things that demo well aren't always great as products.
Yeah. And there's so much more to making a product. The Kinect's from 2010. Like, this is a while ago, right?
Yeah, so the Xbox 360 came out in 2005. And if you think about it, this would have been its mid-season bump, right? Just as this thing started, we've done 1080p, we've done a couple little hardware things. Like the Kinect was maybe the thing that, pushes it through the second half of that life cycle. Unfortunately, it lasted about 15 seconds. So, And, we had the Nintendo Wii at the time, and Microsoft was busy copying some of the UIs. Remember, they did little me-like avatars and with the little Weeble heads and stuff. And I think the Kinect was
back when Don Matrick was running the Xbox.
Yeah.
Too, right?
The Mr. Submarine. And he, there were games that were like, you're going down the river in a raft and everyone's standing in the room jumping together. And
this was the real problem is they're video game players. Did you want them to, you're going to try to make them move around? They play video games.
I know. They're way more comfortable sagging the couch, than they are jumping around a room.
But how long did it take us to figure out how to play with the Wii stick to play tennis?
How many people threw one of those nunchucks through a screen?
Exactly.
Before they're like, maybe we should put a strap on that thing.
But this whole chain of hard, like from the Surface table to the Kinect to the HoloLens, it's all Alex Kipman. It's a logical chain of technology, actually. It moved into early
and every one of them
AI.
is an example of the thing we just talked about, where it's like, wow, that thing is an awesome demo.
Yeah.
Product,
probably not a product.
Mixed results.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like this is logically the end of this, but a HoloLens, that is, to bring it back to the actual topic.
But you put it on the shelf because who knows when AR breaks out and or has an event where it's like, okay, dust that technology off again. Let's see where we're at.
So Burke asked me about my submarine comment. So after the Xbox 360, they did the Xbox One, and the original plans for the Xbox One were many. This was going to be the one that was focused more on entertainment than gaming. Remember, that was their big push. Mm-hmm. Connect was going to be a requirement of this console. And one of the other requirements is that it had to be always connected to the internet, including when you first set it up. So somebody asked Don Madrick in an interview before it came out, they said, well, what if they're on a submarine? Like, there are a lot of people who are the U.S. Navy, for example, are huge fans of Xbox. They play Call of Duty and everything. They can't connect to the internet when they're 10,000 or whatever it is, 2,000 people or surface. And he's like, well, I guess you're going to have to get a different game. He said something like, you'll have to get a 360 or something.
Right.
And it's like, bad answer, Don. And like, that was kind of the end of him. And it was the end of the online requirement for the Xbox One. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Yeah. Someone says, the Wii was an awesome demo that turned out to be an awesome product. Yeah. Those are tricky. I think I'm not trying to rip on Microsoft. I don't think this is a unique Microsoft problem, but it's difficult to do that, to get it right. I think the companies that do get it right, like the Wii, I guess Nintendo did with the Wii, that's a win. That's a huge thing.
Yeah. But Nintendo also controlled this dev story, so they made good games for that controller.
Yeah.
And that's not how Microsoft does things.
And it was a legit innovation from outside that's not even mainstream. That's not even fair. Nintendo is the mainstream. But outside of what the other companies in that space were doing, it was, I compare them to Disney. They're just kind of different. They just do things differently. Like they looked at this and said, here's something wacky. It doesn't make sense. You look at the nunchuck controller or whatever, you're like, what is this thing? Like, it's crazy. But that thing was super successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, good for them.
Yeah. All right. We have reached the end. Yeah. We got there. The end of the Windows segment. We'll take a small little pause here. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to remind everybody that's listening out there about Club TWiT at twit.tv/Club TWiT. For $7 a month, you can join the club and join the fun. You get ad-free access to every single one of our shows. You also gain access to the TWiT Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, behind the scenes, before the show, after the show. Special Club TWiT events get published there. Access to the members-only Discord server. When we're talking about the chat, we're mostly talking about the Discord. And so it's a great place to go to hang with your fellow Club TWiT members and those of us here at TWiT. Paul's talking about his show, Hands on Windows. I've got Hands on Mac and iOS Today and Hands on Tech. And all of those you can get ad-free versions of by joining the club. So please consider joining the club. We've got a 2-week free trial that's going right now, so you can kind of test it out and see if it's for you. And to those of you who are already members, you can refer your friends to earn months of Club TWiT free. That's twit.tv/Club TWiT/referral. So be sure to check that out as well. All right. That is all I have for you, which means it's time to head back to talk about AI and dev.
Which I stupidly just looked at my news feed, and there are 2 stories that may actually fall into this category. So I'm not going to
breaking news alert.
Yeah, I can't get into this too deeply, but ChatGPT 4.5 has not been announced. No, I'm sorry, it is a thing, right? Yeah, they're updating ChatGPT 4.5. I shouldn't be reading this in real time. Let me go back to this. It looks like they're saying that ChatGPT 4.5 will be the last non-reasoning model, and ChatGPT 5, whenever that happens, will include O3, which will then no longer be offered as a standalone model. But there's more going on. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds there. And then in our notes, let me see how I did things. It's like it's in a little blender. Later on, we're going to talk about some dev stuff related to AI, but Microsoft just announced a course for generative AI for beginners with .NET. And that's really interesting to me. I suspect that, I'm just looking at it real quick. I suspect this is cloud-based AI, not local AI, which is what most people think of AI. So I'll be looking at this. Maybe we'll talk about this more next week. Anyway, okay. So we're heading into what I call developer conference season. Mm-hmm. Usually that involves Build from Microsoft and Google I/O from Google, obviously, in May. And then in June, Apple has WWDC. Mm-hmm. And since this has been the schedule, Microsoft and Google have played this little game of chicken where they try not to get in each other's way, sort of, but sometimes do. And they could not have gotten in each other's way more this year.
About as good as it gets, yeah.
Yeah, so the other day, Microsoft announced that Build would be May 19 through 22 in Seattle. Google I/O Google then scheduled I/O for May 20 to 21, the 2 days in the middle of that 4-day span. Now, here's the thing. Here's the problem. Well, there's a couple of problems. There is some overlapping audience here, I would imagine, right? And audiences, right? Because not just developers who may want to be involved with both. I'm sure there are some, but also just people who are like bloggers or press or whatever and want to cover both these events. It's going to be hard to do both in person, right? So I guess you could go to the Build keynote and then leave that and get on a plane and fly down to Mountain View or whatever and go to the Google thing the next, whatever. So good luck with that. But the reason this is a problem is because Google's event is at their own facility. They could schedule this whenever they wanted. They're not beholden to a conference center.
Moscone or anything.
Yeah, they could do this. Like they just did it. They're like, when's Build? Yeah, let's do it then. Like it feels a little, whatever. But okay,
where Build is at the Washington
State Convention Center. That's right. Yep, in Seattle. All right, so there's that. And then speaking of like. Just like openly hostile people I would like to trip secretly if I could. Elon Musk and some group of investors have, well, I say supposedly because at the time the story was they have made a bid for OpenAI. They offered $97.4 billion to buy OpenAI. Elon Musk has been trying a variety of legal tactics to undermine OpenAI, a company he co-founded, back in the day.
And then tried to take over and was kicked out of.
And was kicked out, yeah. And he's just really upset about how, I guess, successful they are probably, and he can't stand it and whatever. Okay, so this is just the latest one. It's kind of underhanded and terrible. Two things to this. One is Sam Altman got on X/Twitter. I still call it Twitter, but so does Sam Altman. And he wrote, "No, thank you, but we will buy Twitter for 97." I wrote 97.4 billion. I mistyped in my article. I just noticed 90 for the same price. Like in other words, like that's a cute number, but of course they're going for a valuation now that they could make OpenAI worth as much as 300 billion, depending on how things go over the next couple of months. So. We'll see, but it's just a little crappy thing. But the other thing is, like, officially, no one has actually made a bid for OpenAI. Yeah. So, like, a couple of days went by, and he said, "Look, I just want to let everyone know. Like, we talked to the board about this. Like, they've never made a bid for our company, so I don't even know. They just made this huge announcement about it, but like, they've never given us a bid, so we can't even evaluate it. We don't have to. We're going to say no to it, but." I just
it's not an OpenAI is not a public company. There's nothing to bid on. There's no process here. It's completely. They're trying
to undermine confidence in this company because I don't know if he has a little company called XAI, for example. That is allegedly competitive with this and whatever. It's the whole thing is so stupid. It's like two children grew into adults but didn't grow into adults in their minds, and they're still kids and they're just slapping each other. And I don't know. Are
you talking about tech bros? That's weird.
Yeah, tech bros, exactly. Well, a tech bro and what appears to be a robot. All right, so I don't know, and you can guess which one I mean by that. OpenAI obviously has about 3 million ChatGPT services now. ChatGPT Search required a sign-in, but now you can just go and access it on the web. You don't have to sign in. Obviously, there are limits when you're not signed in. There are limits when you don't pay, whatever. But they're spreading wide as well as deep now. Google announced that Gemini 2.0, which is a family model, it's not a single model, is now available. Well, the way they described it is available to everybody. And it's like, yeah, not everybody, asterisk, but it's in the process of rolling out to everybody. And what I mean by that is like if you're in Google Workspace, for example, you still don't have the final version of some of these models, but whatever. The models are done. They're heading out. They're available. They have that thing we talked about. Richard will remember last week when he wasn't here about reasoning models where the it kind of sits there and thinks out loud and people are more confident and that kind of thing. So, everyone's doing it. It has that. Okay. So there's that. And then to further the lightning round mode of this part of the show, GitHub Copilot, which to my mind still is possibly the best and the original, meaning the most useful.
I would say most measurable benefit.
There you go.
I've got very good numbers now from a bunch of different teams about the productivity increase of developers. After a better part of a year to really learn how to get it into their workflow, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
20 to 30% performance, deliverable.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's not higher, honestly.
Some people get more, but that seems to be the consistent number.
Yeah. Okay. So to me, it's magic. I think it's incredible. Now, I have run into a couple of instances now where I think you might have been around for this way. I described like me trying to parse this really complex line of code it had created to replace like a block of code I had written. And you sort of assume it's like correct, right? And it's super complex. And I'm like, nope. I was like, I went through, I'm like, this doesn't do the same things. And it didn't. But other than that, I mean, it's been really, really good.
And that's one of the things I've noticed too, is as your work gets more complex, the tool struggles more.
Well, and yeah, I mean, and then God help you, like the things, like I'm not a professional developer. So the thing I'm working on, I've hit the limits of peak Paul here. Like I can't, like I have a hard time if it's not first thing in the morning and I sit in front of the thing and bring up Visual Studio, look at my own code that I wrote, and I'm like, whew, nope. I'm like I can't handle it. Like so. No,
I've definitely used the tool to explain what the heck I wrote yesterday.
But this thing, what this will do is take what is ostensibly, I'll say objectively, at least more readable code. It's more simplistic because I'm an idiot, and it will take the code and write it into something way more efficient, but it's also concise and terse and hard to read. And I'm like, I probably does the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a difference between a link expression and a loop, right?
yeah.
Although Copilot does a good job of flipping between those. So
yeah, I'm waiting for Copilot.
This on .NET Rocks. Like I use the link expression because it's very terse, but I have a comment that is Copilot
exactly. So yeah, so the more down to earth example of this that like any human being would kind of understand if you're not a developer is use a tool like Grammarly or the AI features in Word or whatever it is. And you get some sentence, it underlines something, and it says, you probably want to, this word, maybe you reused it too many times, or maybe it's not the one that always corrects for me is, I'll write, it's hard to know what blah, blah, blah. And it will say, the word difficult is better. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, you know what? You're probably right. I'll switch it. I use difficult. I start typing again, then it underlines difficult. I'm like, what? He goes, I think you mean hard here. And I was like, dude. Yeah. So like, GitHub Copilot, I can sort of get into this as well. It's like, there's a better way to write this. You're like, okay. And then it takes the thing and expands it out into this little thing. Like, okay, I wouldn't have done it that way, but okay, fine. And then you start working on more code. It's like, oh, actually, there's a better way to write this. I'm like, let me guess. It's the other way. Yep, it's the other way.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so you kind of round robin it and you're like, I don't know what's going on anymore. So, like the rest of the AI world, it's GitHub Copilot they added a bunch of new features, for one thing, including Gemini 2.0 Flash is now available in the model picker.
Yep.
It was Anthropic before and ChatGPT and obviously Copilot. And now you can do Gemini. And, but they're previewing, what will become their, what they call an autonomous agent. It's codenamed Project Padawan for now. Speaking of,
cute.
Like a popular movie franchise references. And it will do everything. It will bake bread. It will whatever. It will drive your kid to school. It's gonna whatever. But it's not all I can do right now because I don't pay for this and there's no way for me to really see it. I can just look at their videos. But this is an agent that will work on your behalf in an autonomous way where you kind of set it off on some research project or whatever it is. And it will do the thing that you ask or the multiple things it will do. I don't remember the number, but some number of tasks at once. And then it will come back. You'll be sitting there working in Visual Studio, probably doing that round robin thing I was talking about, wondering where your life went. And it will say, hey, we came back, we solved the problem you wanted us to solve or whatever. So not surprisingly, I'm speaking very theoretically here because I don't have it. So
Thomas Demke promised us a pull request, right? That this tool would actually get to the pull request point, and now you get to review the code and decide if you want to add it or not.
I am struggling not to do this sort of thing because I'm working on this programming project. Like I said, it's above me. And I've chosen a technology that's not well suited for the task. There's all kinds of problems. I'm the biggest one, but whatever. But there is a capability that's in AI today. You could do this in ChatGPT or the other AIs, but this tool specifically will be designed for this and specifically for the kind of developer workloads you do in Visual Studio, meaning you might be using XAML to make the UI for a Windows application or a cross-platform like a Maui app or whatever it might, web app, whatever. What you can do is like draw a picture of a UI. Like you could literally use a crayon and scan it or however you do it. Here's the window. Here's what I want it to look like.
Get a little Microsoft Paint going there.
Yep. And then make the code. And not just make the code to make the UI, which would be useful, but also write the underlying
to the
click event handlers, whatever it might be. So pretty soon we're going to be like the guy with the whistle at a traffic stop that nobody pays attention to, telling AI what to do, and it's like, yeah, I got this, I got it.
I mean, I do appreciate that it's easier to criticize code than it is to write it from scratch, and so having the tool generate the initial chunk of code.
Let me tell you, it's easier to criticize anything than it is to create anything. Yeah, I mean that's
It's just a question of what is the net time, right? Because you're gonna end up having to go through that code and make some corrections and push back and forth, and certainly I've been in this iterative cycle where I'm tweaking and tweaking. Eventually, it's like, okay, go away. I will finish this.
So you've reminded me of something. I didn't intend to tell another story like this, but actually I think this might be instructive. So my wife and I are both writers, right? Mm-hmm. We have both sort of collectively agreed that like we're not going to use AI to write. Like we're not going to say, I have to write a story about this topic. Could you cobble something together and then I'll go edit it or whatever. However, in my wife's case, I had shown her, it was some of the things I was doing for Hands on Windows were in a Copilot plus PC. In the next version of Windows 11, you're going to have this little AI thing that could rewrite and make poems and do all that stuff. I showed her some of that stuff. I showed her the click to do thing with the purple and pink, razzle dazzle, whatever. Apparently this inspired her, which is not usually her reaction to things I tell her. And she went and started looking at AI and was thinking, like, in my workflow, like, how could I actually use this thing? So one of the things she does the most often involves 4 steps. The first step is you talk to someone on the phone, it's not 1999. You talk to them on Zoom, and she records those things. And then those people would be like a doctor or some kind of medical or healthcare professional. It could be a person who had an experience with whatever the thing is she's writing about, and they can tell their story. So she's on the phone for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is. And she does this several times a week. So she then takes that recording that Zoom generates and she pushes it through Microsoft Word, which has a transcription tool built in. You might not know about, but it is in there. And she was doing this early on. Like when she first started doing this, it was only that transcription feature was only available in the web version of Word at the time, but now it's everywhere. So cool. And now you've got this text document that's your conversation, which can be quite big. So she will go, then the third step is she goes through that thing and she pulls out the main points and she kind of organizes them in whatever way she wants. But after that, she writes, right? So I would say as a writer, the only thing she should be doing in some ways is writing, but you also have to talk to people in her case. Like her deal is she talks to people all the time. That's what she does. Yeah. So you can't eliminate that. But the other 2 steps are kind of interesting. Could AI be used to not just transcribe this thing, but then make a summary of some kind in a bullet list or whatever that you could then build what you write? And in her case, she does write herself. She's not using the AI to write for her. And the answer is yes. And so she said, I don't think I'm ever going to go back to doing it the way I used to do this. Like this thing saves me an enormous amount of time. It's super effective. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, and she can be very specific. She'll say, like, for example, she wrote a story about like, I don't remember. It's foods that help with, let's pretend it was inflammation or something. And across 3 different interviews, she got 10 food types of which there's some crossover, but not entirely. And now she can go to OpenAI, or in her case, she used ChatGPT, I think, and say, look, go through this thing, organize these claims they've made, find reliable research from the past 5 years that supports or debunks these claims one at a time. And it goes boop, 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 with sources. And then she can go to the source, make sure it's credible, make sure it's real. This is stuff she did manually. She's been doing this for
intern's job, right?
Yeah. And right. So she's a freelancer, so she is the intern. But so to the people
now she has a digital intern that's pulling these things together for her to validate.
Yeah. So the reason I mention this now, the reason you reminded me of this is because this is how software development is going to go. It's not that you're going to be removed from the equation as a human developer. It's just that your use of the tools is going to change and AI will become part of it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to write all the code for you, although in some cases it can do that. But I think there's use cases like my wife's that can be applied to, different
certain steps,
different jobs. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So there you go. And I'm struck. This is, she's made a leap I have not made. I still, when I write every day, I write thousands and thousands of words. And when I think about what I just said, when I think about what she's done, and I think about how I might use, I can't get there. So maybe I will, but right now I haven't done it. So, okay. One more thing. Last May at Build, Microsoft announced about 3,000 things, but one of those 3,000 things, and one of the 2 or 3 that really, really interested me, was something called the Windows Copilot Runtime, which is not a runtime, but let's get past that. It's just a collection of APIs and models that run on device. So these were for Copilot plus PCs. That's why they announced, well, it's a developer thing. They would have announced it anyway, but they also announced the Copilot plus PCs, right, at the same show. So there'll be all kinds of capabilities you'll be able to use in your own code. We talked about some of them earlier, actually, right? So all the things that are in Recall or Click to Do or the generative AI erase and fill and whatever else that's in Paint and Photos and whatever else, right? You'll be able to use in your own code as a software developer on Windows. But the asterisks here, the important, and the reason, the thing I mentioned up front about the .NET course on generative AI, the reason that's important, unless I completely misunderstand it, is that will be broadly applicable to any developer, because those things happen in the cloud, and you as a .NET developer could write an app that runs on a phone, it runs in the cloud, like a website, it runs as a Windows app if you're one of 3 people who's still doing that, and the Windows Copilot runtime stuff is very specifically for on-device AI, which today is this hard gap between 2 sets of capabilities that I think eventually going to come together and be that orchestrated thing, right?
Yeah.
And I mean it on multiple levels, because the Windows Copilot runtime capabilities, I hate saying the word runtime over and over again because it's not a runtime, but whatever, those APIs only run on the MPU. They only run if the MPU is of a certain power, like a Copilot plus PC. There's no fallback if you don't have those things, right? And so
they don't have an ODBC for this to run it against a GPU or slower.
They don't have an orchestrator that would say, okay, that abstracts that from the developer, the OS, and says, look, you're asking to do this. If you have an MPU, that's the best way to do it. We'll do that. If you have a GPU, we'll do that. That's going to be fantastic. We'll take down the power grid in Miami or whatever, but it's fine. It will work. If you don't have that, CPU will be a little slow, but it will work. Yeah. And if you don't have that,
to the cloud.
That's the thing. The final fallback should be that hybrid scenario where, okay, so what's the corresponding API that's up in the cloud? And that's the piece. We don't have this. Actually, until about yesterday, we didn't have any of it because, but there are cloud APIs and all that stuff. But
yeah, no, the OpenAI API has been emulated by a bunch of the other LLMs because it's becoming the common interface.
It's becoming an ODBC. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm doing this in the house here, right? Where I'm still calling out to the OpenAI API for the language stuff in the house, but I can replace it with a local model running Claude that has the OpenAI API. Emulator in front of it.
This is interesting because depending on what it is, like when Copilot plus PC first came out and it was image generation capabilities that would run on the device, compared to the same app, a slightly different feature, but run against the cloud, the images you would generate off the MPU were garbage, like compared to what you could do against the cloud. Now, from Microsoft's perspective, they just saved 17 cents because you're not hitting the cloud. So, it's better for them. And then someday maybe we'll catch up enough and it will be good. What I've seen since then is that the capabilities that run on device have actually gotten better. I'm not saying the image generation is as good. It's not, but there's all these, SLMs really. Microsoft confusingly calls them local language models because it's LLM again and stop, but whatever. SLMs that run on device. They've gotten better. So I described Notepad and the rewrite stuff. That stuff's fantastic. But the thing that's been missing is that thing they announced last May, the actual Windows Copilot runtime. Where are these APIs, right? Yeah. So about a week ago, they hit the Windows App SDK 1.7 Experimental 3 release. So if you go back to the tape, and I did, Davlan Palori said this will come out next January. He actually said that. Wow. And it kind of did. It was February, but they only missed it by a couple of days. It was a slightly different version of the app SDK, whatever, who cares? It's experimental. You cannot use this in production. It's not like, sometimes in .NET pre-release, they'll say, look, actually this version preview, what do they call it? Release candidate. You can actually put it in production if you want. It's not there. As we started the show, Raphael texted me and said, you're not going to believe this because we were chatting about this yesterday. They just put it into preview. I had guessed, and he had guessed separately, that these capabilities will be released to build in stable, and this suggests that's what's going to happen. I just mentioned that I am not a professional developer. I feel it's important to keep highlighting that, but I've been I keep checking, like, where is it? It just came out. So I actually wrote a little app, which I wrote an article about, that just does 2 things. You paste in text and then you can summarize it, or you can rewrite it. And that's two of the capabilities, right? That Microsoft Word does with Copilot, that Notepad does with this new built-in capability on device. And let me tell you something. It's about 7 lines of code, and it works freaking great. Like, it's awesome.
It's impressive.
I don't know what I'm doing. And I wrote an app that does those things. And it looks like garbage because I didn't care. I was just throwing it together.
Trying to make it work. Yeah.
It's happening. So this is very exciting. And there's a bunch of stuff. So we mentioned OCR. That's one of those capabilities. The ability to isolate objects in an image so that you can then do generative fill or generative erase on that thing. That's in the APIs.
Wow.
I can't remember all of them. I'm sorry off the top. There's a bunch of them. Like, it's a big list. So I suspect when build comes around in about 2 months, that Microsoft's going to have a pretty good story. The problem is, and the question is, the Windows App SDK is very specific. Well, this part of it, sorry. The Windows Copilot runtime, these capabilities are on-device. MPO requires a Copilot plus PC.
Right.
There's no fallback. You can test to see if the machine meets it. And if it doesn't, the else clause is up to you. There's no APIs for you. You got to go figure that out.
In theory, this is what Microsoft's good at.
Right.
Although I realize Microsoft builds compatibility layers when they're not leading in a market or believe they're leading in a market.
Yep. So the way to think of this, and I think this is going to change. So I said there's my guess is they're going to announce this, but I have a question. The question I have is, what will they announce the next step, which is some form of fallback, right? Logically, the next form of fallback, the first form, I guess, would be GPU, CPU, right?
Yeah. MPU emulation on GPU, MPU emulation
100%.
on CPU.
They'd be so. I mean, it's like turning.
And
it's
an
like
MPU
it's probably
proxy to cloud.
It's probably a registry switch. Like, it's probably going to be really easy, right?
Yeah, I suspect it already
but
exists.
the more sophisticated thing would be that orchestrator thing, if they can go to the cloud with it. Now, the reason to believe that's not going to happen is because we can look at what's in Windows 11 today, and that does not exist, right? So I just mentioned these things. If you have Notepad and you're running, like now you have to be in the dev or beta channel, and you have a Copilot plus PC, you will get a little AI icon that will give you those features I described. If you're running it on a normal PC, like the one I'm using here, it just looks like Notepad looks. Like that thing is not there. You don't get that. If you're running Paint, and I mentioned the new Copilot menu with those features. If you have a non-Copilot plus PC, you'll just get the 2 features that don't require that. If you have a Copilot plus PC, you'll see all 4 because 2 of them require the MPU. So Microsoft's not even doing it yet, right? So I'm looking at a future that they're not even doing. So to me, what this needs is that thing I just described. So, but I've been waiting 9 months. So, and I think others have too. So I'm excited that it's finally happening. I think build is going to be super interesting.
Yeah.
Even though most of it's going to focus on the other stuff, like not Windows and whatever. But I'm looking. Sorry.
I mean, we'll see. Like, there seems to be a lot of energy around what they're doing at build.
Yeah. So if this stuff is in any way interesting to you, definitely pay attention to build this year. I think it's going to be.
I suspect we'll both be there.
We'll see. I might go to the Google one instead.
Told me it happens to be the same week as NDC Oslo, which I love, and I'm already accepted to. And they said, "Oh, please don't go to Oslo." I'm like, "Why? Let's have a meeting." I'm like, okay, well, that meeting hasn't happened yet, but I strongly suspect I'm not going to Oslo.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else in AI dev news before we head into?
No, I guess not. I hope I didn't babble there. I'm actually very excited about this. And I think it speaks to that conversation up front about like, well, AI, I've never seen AI do anything interesting. It's like, you're not looking hard enough. I mean, closer, it's, there's a bunch of stuff.
I agree. All right. It is time now to move on to earnings, where we always have some Paul's favorite learnings.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so we're in that part of the quarter, and there'll be a few more next week. The PC makers, I think it's Dell and Lenovo and HP are always going to bring up the rear with this stuff.
Right.
But we did some of the big ones: Apple, Microsoft, Google/Alphabet last week. This week we get some more, like Amazon, the biggest one, like 188 billion in revenues. The big thing there is not so much their revenues, not AWS revenues, although that's interesting to look at to compare to what Microsoft's doing with their Microsoft Cloud non-business, is They spent $28 billion in this quarter on AI infrastructure CapEx build. Yikes. That's more than Microsoft. Microsoft was 21, if I remember correctly, 22 maybe. And they said in this fiscal year, they're going to send $75 billion compared to the $80 billion that Microsoft threatened or promised or whatever. Google had a similar, number. I don't remember that one, but these companies are spending because there's no tomorrow.
To be clear, they're spending cash. This would have been money that otherwise would have been used for stock buybacks. And now they're
Jeff Bezos was making a bet of the money and jumping on it from a high height. And now they're actually using it. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a little oily and
one of the
greasy,
arguments I've heard is that the hype around AI is useful in terms of being able to secure zoning.
Yeah.
To be able to get that, whether they use these data centers for AI or not, they're going to need them eventually.
Yep.
And so right now, if you think about just a few years ago, before this AI cycle, there was a real pushback on building more data centers.
That's right.
The towns were refusing them. And now they're utilizing this hype cycle to get past a lot of those barriers.
I made this point either last week when you weren't here or the previous week, but in the Lehigh Valley where I live in Pennsylvania, it's full of Amazon warehouses now. It's a nightmare. There's trucks everywhere. I'd give anything for those things to be data centers. I mean, and if you're familiar with the what do you call it? Asimov Foundation books, there's this planet that has been covered it just looks like metal from outer space because it's all metal, it's buildings and whatever. Yeah. And this is what we're going to have. We're going to have data centers in the ocean. We're going to have them in space with satellites. We're going to have them, we're heading into a crazy future, but,
but I think this feels very much like the end of the .com boom with all the fiber being laid.
Yeah.
Right. It is a sprint to spend the money while you can, make the moves while you can.
Yep.
Because it will end.
That's right. And then there'll be, the one I remember is, I think it was Verizon was going to fiber the entire state of Vermont. Yeah. And then they realized how much it was going to cost. And that had changed. And they were like, just kidding. We're not going to do that. And, they had to pay some bills there.
But then 2001 came along. A whole bunch of those companies went broke. But the fiber was already laid. And now it was available 10 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
Right? As much as this is insane, it's also useful, right? No, we're going to use this infrastructure. There's no doubt about it. I mean, whatever infrastructure, these companies still can't meet demand. The reason Amazon is spending this money, one of the reasons, stabilizing the power grid because they're demanding so much power.
Well, we got to make those funny graphics or whatever, the memes. Yeah. And then this has been, had been delayed for some time, but in about 2 weeks? Yeah, 2 weeks from today, actually, Amazon is going to have their next devices and services event, which means two things. We're going to get to see Panos Panay again, which, yay. And what's that?
I'm excited.
I hope he's I'd like to see him to be replaced by an AI avatar, but we'll see. And this will be that conversational Alexa, just like Apple is trying to improve Siri to be less like Zoe Deschanel and more like a rocket scientist. They're doing the same thing, We'll see what form that takes. It took longer. They didn't describe it quite this way, but basically said it's a hard computer science problem. They're working on it. Okay. And then, my favorite news of the week, actually, Qualcomm announced their earnings, $11.7 billion in revenue, up 17%. But as part of the little earnings conference call, surprise, surprise, ARM Holdings contacted them and said, just kidding, guys, we're done. Sorry about that. They withdrew their complaint.
Listened to the judge and went, you are going to lose.
Yes. And it's like, maybe we shouldn't be attacking our biggest customer. And
you think?
We still want more licensing fees. It's probably going to come from another company. Or some other set of companies, whatever. So that's great. So that's moved on. And then just because I like beating on them now, because they've hurt me so much, and I'm going to show you where on the bear, Sonos has had another negative quarter, another negative year, actually. And they were supposed to release the broadest set of products ever in their history last year. They released two, one of which triggered that Sonosgate thing with the app fiasco and blah, 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 whatever. So they finally got rid of the CEO, I think, last month, and then restructured.
They had a dev too, right?
So. Yeah, and layoffs and whatever. So, good luck.
Sonos. This really means taking a lot longer to fix the problem. Like, you're now talking about reconstituting a team to try and figure out how to.
I guess Sonos I think the way the teams were built is every product had its own team. And there was like, maybe there's a simpler structure here where we actually work with each other.
Well, and I'm still wrestling with, is the team fighting internally, or are they fighting management? Like, who's really the power broker here? I can't tell you how many times I've been in situations where I realized, hey, this company's actually built around this chunk of software written by this guy 4 years ago, and he left 2 years ago, and you've been decorating it ever since.
I just, so I don't know anybody who works at Sonos anymore, but I do know that this always comes out, right? So they do the app fiasco, they screw it up, they can't release the old app again. I don't know why they didn't just leave it in the market, blah, blah, whatever. They
might have had a licensing problem.
They did all this stupid stuff they did. And then what comes out is their employees were telling them not to do this before they did it. They were like, what's going to happen, right? Like so I'm hoping that it's those guys who are left and like, the credible ones or whatever. I hope.
You never know. But often the best and brightest, when he gets to the situation, they've got another job anyway. So they leave, right? And all you're left with
they have good core tech. Their products, their hardware products are of high quality.
Sure. No, they're all over my house. They're all over your house.
No, I know. I have a ton of them. And the app has always stunk, and the new one is even worse. Yeah. It's prettier, but dumber. It's a supermodel of apps, whatever. But
I'm now relying on my Home Assistant interface to Sonos to be able to actually control.
I just rely on AirPlay now. I pretend the Sonos app doesn't exist.
Yeah, or Spotify. I mean, that's your workaround.
Yeah. Yep.
Now it's just a semi-smart speaker.
Yeah. So there you go. Okay. Somehow, wow, we got through that pretty quick.
We did.
I feel like I missed something.
That's all right.
I don't know. I guess not.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's
skip something big. No,
but hey, it's a light Xbox this time around. Right?
Yeah. Which, you know what? I love it. Anytime I'm on, there's always a corner of the show, and this is Xbox Corner. So,
do we have the Halo?
The Halo music. Yeah, we haven't actually heard that.
Is there like a jingle?
Well, yeah, it's like the Halo music in reverse. It says Master Chief is dead if you listen carefully. Okay, jeez. In the beginning, God created... Oh, I'm sorry. So one of the problems covering Xbox as a business is that it hasn't been going well for a while. And so I want to say it was 2015, maybe, they stopped releasing console sales numbers. Now, this is something a lot of companies did, even Apple. Remember, Apple used to be very super transparent. Every quarter, we sold this many Macs, this many iPhones, this many whatever. Yeah. So they stopped doing that, right? The problem for Xbox is that they compete in a market where the other two players release very explicit numbers, right? So we kind of know we literally know how many PlayStation 5s have been sold, how many Nintendo Switches now have been sold. Yeah. You missed this, Richard, last week, but the Nintendo did their latest quarterly financial release and had to revise their estimates again. So by the end of Nintendo's... Yeah, downward, sorry.
They've been pitching the Switch 2 for so long. I think they're actually hurting Switch sales. People are waiting.
Yeah. So they're not going to... Their goal was by the end of the fiscal year for Switch to be the best-selling console of all time. It's going to just miss it barely. But obviously this year it will...
It's easy to fix. Eventually. You just create a discounted version of the Switch to
clear
off your inventory.
That's right. They'll definitely keep it in the market for a while. It'll be fine.
You got to drain the shelves. What are you going to do? Plow them? Sell them off?
Well,
Make enough to make it the best-selling of all time. And then blow up.
No, it's fine to have a lower, there's going to be compatibility between the games, and it's okay to have this, that's fine. But in Microsoft's case, we've had to deal with all these kind of soft numbers for a long time. Microsoft uses different metrics for success because the sales numbers are not a measure of success. So there's this engagement, so many users, so many monthly average users, so many people. Every once in a while, we will get a Game Pass number. We haven't got one of those in a while. So there's a video game company you probably heard of called Take-Two. They did their quarterly results, not particularly good, by the way, but whatever. Yeah. And they just kind of throw it in a slide, like their 94 plus million the current generation consoles have been sold as of November 2024. Now, Generation 9 means PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. And we know how many PlayStations have been sold, which means we sort of know how many Xboxes have been sold, even though Microsoft hasn't told us. I've gotten some weird pushback about this, as if somehow we're guessing on this. And yes, I mean, I would use the word estimate. I would also use the word educated in there somewhere, because we're not pulling a number out of anyone's butt or anything.
And we know
like
how
this
many you made. You know how many shipped to stores. You may or may not know how many were actually sold in the stores, but somewhere in there is a number.
These guys have insight into the channel that we do not.
Yeah.
So this is not a random source. Like, this is, I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but it's accurate enough. So here's the thing. If you do the math, that means that probably fewer than 30 million Xbox Series X and S consoles have been sold in this that is this generation, which is less than half of the 65.5 million we knew that Sony had
PS5s.
sold through that same time frame. Roughly, it's a month off, but close enough, right? Sony did not sell 10 million more in 1 month. They might have sold a million or two. It's close.
Xbox did sell 30 million more to be competitive. So
yeah. So in the previous console generation, and again, we went through that entire thing not knowing what they were selling. The general feeling, and it was based on some reports like this and some other things, that whatever estimates from whatever analysts, et cetera, was that Sony was outselling Microsoft at that time by about 2-1. And the feeling in the current generation, and you can go back and look at this, it's horrible. Every quarter, double-digit and big double-digit losses in revenues, quarter over quarter, like year-over-year rather, quarterly year-over-year in console hardware revenues. It has to stop somewhere. Like, it's bizarre how long this has gone on.
When does this stop is the question.
So we've gotten reports that are much vaguer than this that have suggested maybe this gap might have grown to as big as 3-1, right? But whatever the number is, it explains the Xbox strategy, which is the thing I said earlier about Satya Nadella, meet in this case, players where they are. And it's why you see Xbox is more about being a platform that works everywhere, or as many places as they can. You're going to see Switch 2 games, more games on PlayStation, PC games, cross-platform, blah, 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 whatever. But what this means is, if this figure is accurate, and I did write it that way, I didn't just say like this figure is accurate, but it seems good to me. Sony is currently outselling Xbox by about 2.25 to 1. And I got to say, that is not bad compared to what we thought it was. And just looking at how much money they're just erupting into the world, like on these consoles, like it's just not working out. So we can debate whether Microsoft will or will not be successful with this new strategy. I've made this case a lot of times. I think it's the right strategy. I think it's the one that could work. They are the biggest game publisher in the world now. Well, let's see. Meantime, while the consoles aren't doing well, they own the majority of game houses. Right. And with that in mind, they had a major new release this week. Not really. King, which is the other part of Activision Blizzard we don't really talk about, because sometimes that's
the mobile game story they were so excited about.
So even when it was in a standalone, like when Activision was its own company before Microsoft bought it, they would refer to themselves as Activision Blizzard, and Activision Blizzard King, sometimes in the same paragraph. So they're different names, but those are the three primary components. Microsoft had made the case in the past that it wasn't so much about Call of Duty, although fantastic. They needed to get into the mobile space, and that was what the King part of that business did. So most people in the Microsoft space are familiar with King because Candy Crush was included in Windows for a horrible short period of time. And if you didn't like the new Outlook, I got to tell you, Candy Crush is stupid or whatever. So what I can only describe as the perfect King/Microsoft mashup, the latest version of this game franchise is called Candy Crush Solitaire, which I assume will be followed by Candy Crush Minesweeper, Candy Crush Reversey, Candy Crush Pinball, 3D or whatever. So there you go. So I'm what am I, 50? I think I'm 58 years old. I had to do the math on that because I'm old. And there's no version of my life where I play this freaking game, but whatever. It's I'm sure it's big or something with the kids or whatever. I don't know.
Everybody plays some version of Candy Crush at some point in their life. You can't deny it. It's not just a thing.
I'm trying to think if I've ever played it. I think I've played games like Candy Crush. There was a game on Windows Phone that was I think it was called Bejeweled, maybe?
Yep. Same species.
Like
Bejeweled.
Yeah, Bejeweled. Yep. But
there are quite a few of those match 3, match 4 games, and I don't know if I've ever played Candy Crush proper either, but I've played 1 or 2 of them.
I assume it's exactly like Wordle. It's intelligent.
Definitely challenges the brain. Absolutely.
Honestly,
something I don't know.
Wow! Look at the time, and we've already made it to.
I know we've powered through this.
the tips and picks of the week. And it, of course, starts out with wonderful. I guess you've got a kind of a set of tips of the week.
Yeah, more than I expected to have. In fact, between the time I put the notes in here and then started the show, I actually added 2 items to this so Richard was there when my phone buzzed and I looked down and it was the guy I work with, and he said, "We're locked out of one of our Twitter accounts."
That was a great morning for you. You were very excited.
Yeah, I handled it in a very adult fashion. So the
actually stomp off. You just said, "I have to go."
I just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then there was
we all had breakfast without you.
The cape unfurled and he was gone, and it was a blast of smoke. But within minutes of this, I also got Brad texted me and he said, "Hey, I can't upload the latest video to our YouTube channel. Could you reinstate me as a manager or whatever?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I told the story. I don't want to beat this to death. I've actually retold the story many times because it's trauma and that's how I get through it. But YouTube locked me out of my YouTube channel without any warning. We had switched the ownership over to me 2 years ago, 2 years prior, when I took control of my part of the company. And we had been uploading videos for 2 years, and then we couldn't. So yeah, I went back. I didn't have breakfast. I went back to the room. I spent a bunch of time on a chat with YouTube support, which the word support should be in air quotes because I didn't get any. I was very upset with these people. I then spent the week. We flew home from Puerto Vallarta. I kept checking in. Kept checking. Can we whatever. And again, without beating it to death, to get this back, I had to go back to the owner of the company who before. Ask him to reinstate Brad's Google Workspace account, reset the password so I could get into it, and then they could send the code to him. And the first time it asked for an authentication, which don't have. So I looked for other forms, and it had his phone number. It had the last 2 numbers were there, and I knew those were Brad's number. So I texted Brad, said, "Please give me the code."
Do this,
and he did. And then I went in to switch the ownership back to me for the second time. I got into the account and it asked for an authentication again. And this time there was no choice. It had to go through the authenticator app. And I texted Brad knowing the answer. And I said, "You're going to be able to, do you
give me the authenticator?" Yeah.
He did. Even though this thing had been dead for 2 years, it was still sitting there in his app. And I got the code. It's the only reason I got back into this account. They never would have done it for me, the jerks.
Yeah.
So I've been undergoing this kind of it's going to be a year-long pursuit of rethinking a lot of things related to where data is stored and backed up and whatever, all kinds of stuff. I've been talking about this. So I have now written 3 articles about this. If anyone wants to know anything about Google, YouTube brand accounts, I know more than anybody on earth right now, including I think the company. I've made a lot of mistakes with it, but it is a bizarre thing that I can, with my paul@thurrott.com Google Workspace account, sign into YouTube, go to a drop down, and select between different brand accounts. So I have one for Eternal Spring, which is the thing I do with my wife, and I have one for thurrott.com. I can't use those brand accounts to sign into things like Google Search, Google Maps, Google Gmail, whatever. It turns out there are 3 services that you can use these things with. YouTube, obviously, that's actually what it's for. Google Photos, interestingly, but also Google Takeout. So I made the mistake of doing Google Takeout with my primary account, thinking it would give me everything. I was thinking I was going to get Eternal Spring. I was going to get thurrott.com. I was going to get whatever was in my account.
Right.
And I did it. I just to back it up for now. I'm eventually going to do a NAS, and I'll start replicating, whatever. And I put it together and I was like, this doesn't have half of my videos. It doesn't have all the videos I did with Brad for First Ring Daily. Like, where is this stuff? And I'm thinking, I can't go to Brad and be like, "Hey, Brad, could you download all the videos yourself?" Why can't I own this thing? Why can't I get in? But I had made the mistake. I didn't sign into Takeout with my brand account, which I didn't even know you could do. So yesterday I did. And every time I do Takeout, I don't know if you ever use this service. It's actually pretty fantastic, but also pretty convoluted. I always choose 2 gigabyte files because they're just easier to download. You have to do it manually. There's no way to automate this. And I think the first time I did it, not understanding it wasn't all of it, there were 81 of them or something.
Right.
When I was out at lunch with my wife yesterday, my phone buzzed. I looked down, it's an email from Google. Google, it's like, "Your takeout is ready." I'm like, "Nice." And I'm going to get the number wrong. Let me just see if I can find this number. It's crazy. This number is nuts. It is...
how many terabytes?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. 1,373 2 gigabyte files.
Nice.
Yikes. And I literally, this is what I said. I saw that on my phone. We're sitting there eating lunch and I said, we're going to need a bigger boat. And my wife, who's apparently
3
not
terabytes.
in my head, said, excuse me? And I'm like, I thought I was going to be able to handle this with the thing I had here, and now I can't.
No.
So sorry.
This is a great conversation about should you go NAS? Like, what's the right way to do this?
Yep. So it's not going to be as bad as it sounds. Like I looked at the whatever it is, the number was 1373, whatever files, and some of them are like 1.6, like they're not all 2 gigabytes.
So it's not 2.7 terabytes. It's 2 terabytes.
Somewhere in there, whatever the number is. I don't know. So, okay. But I still have to download them,
You
whatever.
can buy a drive that'll fit that.
I did. I literally did that. So when I get home from Mexico, I'm going to get a NAS. I'm going to start getting this set up. And if it works out the way I want it to, I'll do 2. And
the other argument here is to use cold storage services in the cloud.
Yeah. Amazon Glacier or whatever.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the same issue from the point of view of, if I get locked out of this account, all this stuff is gone. So I need it backed up somewhere. It just needs to be under a different set of credentials.
That's right.
So whether those are credentials that are local,
it could be anything, right?
Or they're in the cloud. It doesn't matter as long as they're a different set of credentials.
Yeah. In one of these articles, 20 years ago, I had a 30 gigabyte, which, today is hilarious. Is an MP3 file. I know. Go bad on a computer, and I lost a bunch of stuff. So that's how you get religion, right? You have a loss, you have a problem, and you're like, all right, this is not going to happen.
Everybody has to lose something before they really clue in the.
So I went to my wife and I said, you remember this is literally 20 years ago. I mean, almost to the month, 20 years ago. And I said, I'd done some research and I said, I need to buy 2, which at the time were ginormous, 1 terabyte external hard drives. It's FireWire 800 interface, primarily for the Mac market, but I found a FireWire 800 card I could put in my Windows server. And my plan was I was going to back up on some schedule to both drives the first time and then leave one at my parents' house. And then a month later, I would back up again, and then I'd swap the drives and back up again, and a month could go. And, and I did that for several years. But of course, cloud services happen, OneDrive, Google, whatever. So we have all these different options. And it was actually literally 10 years ago. I got a NAS, which at that time had 2 6 terabyte drives mirrored, but only one of them, obviously, one house like a normal person. And I used that for several years. It's out of support now. I can't use it online anymore. I can't access it from here because it's in Pennsylvania, whatever. So I'm kind of overdue doing this, but I think the shift for me is going to be, to date, I've been putting my most important data, which is our photo collection, which I consolidated. It's our, the stuff we work, our work files that for me date back 30 years. And those things are replicated. They're in OneDrive or in Google, whatever. They're in a NAS at home. But to me, I'm gonna make the NAS be that are gonna replicate to each other, be like the primary source of that stuff. And I'll back up to Google Drive or OneDrive, et cetera, because
I like the 3 copy solution. Always makes me more comfortable, right?
And it's got that geographic bit to it, right? Which you want. And
so you're operating YouTube, you have a local store, and then you're synced offsite. So
so ultimately,
and all with different credentials. Like I think it's the
100%.
credential issue that's going to get you. You get locked out of a Google account, and everything's under that Google account. You're hooped.
This was look. I knew this, but it's sort of like saying, look, when bad things happen, a lot of time, or even a good thing, you're having a child. Like your life's going to change. You have no idea how much your life is going to change.
Yeah.
So it
doesn't matter how many people explain it to you. You just don't understand.
Logically, you can explain it. Does not matter. So logically, I knew this was possible. We've all heard stories about this. Some guy had pictures of his kid in the bathtub. They're cute. Got some scan of they got flagged, lost his account, never got it back. Great, there are all my photos. What the hell, Google? Whatever it is, right? This happens, but it has to happen to you, right? So now I'm not thanking Google for this because they were terrible, but this was a reminder that I need to fix this. So I'm going to spend a big chunk of this year fixing this. And I've already made a bunch of mistakes. It's hilarious, but that's what I do. I struggle through it. So you can follow along.
Getting away from actually having full rack servers down to just a Synology, I feel pretty good about myself.
I went back and looked. I have my archives there. So I went back and I have this stuff, but there are multiple locations. I found the Lace. It was a Lacey was the name of the company. External hard drive. Super. I went to the Wayback Machine, found the website from that month, and sure enough, there is $9.99. My wife, to her credit, by the way, because I went to her and said I need to spend $2,000. This is what I'm going to do, and she was like, just do it. I know you know what you're doing. I know this is important. You don't have to explain it. I'll just do it. And same reaction. Like we're having the same conversation 20 years later. Now I got she's like, yep. Just do it.
Just do it.
So
and
I'm doing it.
I'm doing roughly the same money again.
That's the weird coincidence. Whatever. 100%. So that's happening, and so I'll be suffering a lot this year. Bill Gates last week came out with the first of a planned 3 autobiographies. This covers his life up through the formation of Microsoft. So the book ends with him driving from Albuquerque to Seattle, right? So
the famous and getting busted, right?
Twice. Yeah, he got pulled over twice on that trip. It was just hilarious. I have mixed feelings about Bill Gates, but I very much feel like he's rehabilitating image right now. Like 100%. But if you think about his life and you think about what I do for a living, the part I care about is the middle one, right? The Microsoft part. So that's going to come out in some 2-5 years, whatever it is. So I was thinking, I'm not going to care about this book too much. I have to say, this book is much better than I thought it was going to be. And it also covers more of a period that I care about than I thought it was going to. I didn't think it would have any of the Albuquerque stuff. So it actually has all of that stuff. So between his, and by the way, he goes, this is, I think it blows my mind that it never occurred to me, but Richard, you'll know this. And Mike, he's maybe so famous. Everyone kind of knows this, but when Bill Gates was young, there was 2 things that really striking. Like there were a bunch of executives at Microsoft who like imitated the way he looked and the way he did things. So like Jeff Rakes is a great example. But he had this weird habit. He would sit in a chair and kind of rock back and forth.
Yeah.
And this is how he would process information. So you could tell he was deep thinking or whatever when he did that, but he would do it without realizing he was doing it. And of course, today they would have thrown him in a padded cell. No, I'm just kidding. They would have, he'd have ADHD, he's on the spectrum, whatever it is. This is a thing we didn't know about or talk about in the 1970s. So he was undiagnosed, right? He talks very openly about that. And I think that part of the book is really interesting. But to me, from the industry perspective, it was a great reminder because I grew up reading these books, the Genesis books about Microsoft, like Gates by Stephen Maness or Hard Drive, or the early books about Apple, same thing. And I always felt like I missed it. Like this industry we're in was invented in the mid 70s to early 80s, and it was gone. So by the time I was of age, late 80s, whatever, I missed it, right? And it turns out the internet was a nice little, actually you're going to be okay. This stuff's still happening now, AI, whatever. But I had read all this stuff. I'd read it multiple times. But in more recent years, Paul Allen sadly has passed away, but he wrote his memoir, Idea Man, which is, by the way, also worth reading. And between that book, and the final quarter of the Gates book, we now have what I would say is kind of the definitive story of what happened with them inventing the thing. So I wrote an article about this, but the thing I want people to know is the incredible thing that these people achieved, the perfect nexus of time, place, and people to invent this industry. Paul Allen wrote, he called it a simulator, but an emulator that would emulate first 8008 Intel code on the PDP-10 that he had access to, and then did it for the 8080, which is the thing the Altair was based on, the first personal computer. Gates, using that emulator and a debugger that he wrote, created an incredible version of BASIC for the day, and then later 3 versions. Never had hardware to run this thing on. Saved it to paper tape. Paul Allen got in a plane, realized on the way there he had forgotten to write the bootloader, wrote it in assembly language, 8080 assembly language, a chip he has never seen, on paper.
Right.
Got to the company.
And it was like 118 instructions too.
Which requires whatever that is times 8.
Yeah.
Across a bank of switches to enter those all in.
Yeah, manually.
Got it right on the first try, and it said, ready. how much memory do you have? And he typed in 7268, whatever the number was. And then he typed in 2 + 2 and it said 4. And it worked the first time.
Yeah.
He then entered the code for a lunar lander game, which worked the first time. All of their code worked. In fact, it was better on the real hardware, which he didn't expect because the PDP 11 or 10 was much more powerful, ostensibly. But now that it's running natively on the hardware, he was like, this thing is flying. And that is the start of Microsoft, and it's the start of the personal computer industry. And I'm sorry, but whatever I think about this person and these people and whatever, or you think about them, that is incredible. It's incredible. You should read this book. That's my point.
Yeah. It's excellent.
All right. I feel like I've talked too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off on my app. I'm going to show off on, I'm going to hold off on the app pick. I'll just do that next week because I do want to talk about this, and I don't want to waste any more time with me, blah, blah, blah. And so let's just do that next week, if that's okay.
I have, that works for me. It works for you, Richard Campbell. I am definitely getting that book. That was, that sounds really interesting.
It's more worth it than I thought it was going to be. I was kind of not sure, but it's very good. It feels honest and it's well written.
Nice. All right. That means it's time to talk about the Run As Radio for this week.
This week's episode's with my friend Robert Smith, fellow MVP, has been for a long, long time, and one of my go-tos for Windows Server. And so we were talking about what does it take to move to Windows Server 2025. Now that's been out for a while, and so the conservative sysadmins are like, do I want this? And it's a real good question of, is it necessary to move up? And a big piece of this ended up being the Active Directory conversation, because Active Directory is not an easy thing to get rid of. You do still need to authenticate on premise, and doing it through the cloud.
Doesn't it kind of feel like they touched it for the first time in a long time too? Like that in a meaningful way?
22 had some things, but 20, again, in mentioning that KB article, because that was the big push on, we've got to fight against these lateral exploits through Active Directory that the black hats are using.
Right.
And so one of the things that 2025 definitely builds up some stronger functionality in Active Directory that is both secure and easier to deal with, but it does mean lifting your AD functional level, which is, again, these are old school conversations. That means you the functional level you want is Server 2016, which is not that new. It's 10 years old.
It's crazy. Yeah.
But that means you have to eliminate all older versions of Active Directory from your infrastructure, right, to be able to go to 2016 functional level. So it's generally speaking today for most organizations, you only have 1 or 2 bare metal AD servers. They're your cold start servers, and then the rest are virtual machines. So you build out a template of a virtual machine, relatively small, because it's just doing AD workloads, nothing else. There's no reason to combine it with anything. And then make sure they're pushed in the right location so that they are available locally for however widely distributed your place was. And then you push up your functional levels. And this also involves certs and a couple of other things. So there's some work to be done there, and it's good old-fashioned work. But you get some wins. Some wins when you get to 2025, you get some functionality that make people a little uncomfortable, like SMB over quick. At its essential level, SMB over quick is exposing a file server to the internet. How you feel it? Like, that should bother you because you've been living behind firewalls for a long time. Now, Quick is very secure. Like,
I was going to say, is this better than HTTPS? Or
yeah, it is. Yeah. But more importantly, it's very efficient for file transfers, and it takes load off your VPN. Okay. So you've got this whole conversation going on about maybe, I could just haul all this stuff to OneDrive and be an M365 guy, and that takes care of this problem, because that's certainly what they count on is SMB over quick. But if you've still got on-prem file stores, you can get that same feature without having to ram through your VPN for it. So SMB compression, another big feature on it. So good conversation from someone who's really doing the work. Like, part of Robert Smith's daily job is helping companies get 2025 running. And so he's going through different organizations that are battling these problems. And so it was good to get him in on the show and just talk through, okay, here's what I've seen over the past few months. These are the problems you're going to have, but these are the wins you're going to like.
You must talk to Jeff Woolsey from time to time.
Oh yeah, Woolsey's on. I try to get Woolsey on every year. He's just tough to get. But last time I had him on, he wasn't allowed to call it Server 2025. It was Server V Next.
I'm sorry. Of course, I did listen. Yes. He was especially. It was like a lot of Hyper-V, I think, at the that's an interesting angle on it. I've been holding off on a show of like, okay, so you had to flee VMware. How are you feeling now? Because of the horrors that have happened on the VMware side. Because for the most part, VMware people look down on Hyper-V big time, right? Yeah. I mean, of course.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
Well, it's kind of like, well, how you feeling now, right? Like virtualization is good, but virtualization vendors, hard.
Yeah.
Very problematic. Anyway, Robert's a good guy, super easy conversation. He was just straight do's and don'ts. This is going to be hard. This is going to be easy. Look for this. Watch out for that. Boop, 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 boop. You spend a half hour on that, you're in a better place for moving to 25.
Yes.
All right. And now we round out the show with the brown liquor pick of the week.
I got to look at this.
And there's two links there, Kev, for a reason. Because the Magnifier story, this is the Swedish whiskey. Because I was in Sweden last week. This is the one I wrote for last week and was unable to present.
Right.
Magnifier is actually a village about 200 kilometers north of Stockholm. It was originally a mining area. This is the ironworks going back to like the 1600s, although the ironworks finally shut down in the 1970s as it just became too expensive to operate. It says, so this is not old whiskey. This is new whiskey. Magnifier was formed in 1999. 8 friends on a skiing trip, all bringing different whiskeys, ended up talking about whiskey and why are there no great Swedish whiskeys? The Swedes make their own alcohol. Theirs is aquavit, but they thought, well, why couldn't we make whiskey? One of those 8 is a fellow by the name of Magnus Dandenel, who became the CEO. So they started operations in 2002. Took a little while to get going, but to make a product quickly, they did a clever thing. They use 30-liter casks, little casks, instead of 500 liters or 600 liters, 30. So you got a lot more wood contact for your new make. So you age the spirit pretty quickly there. It has its own quirks, but they definitely tried to make a Swedish whiskey. And of course, the Swedes grow their own barley, so that's fine. They even have their own peat. So in fact, they went all out when they first started making product to say, can we get every ingredient for our whiskey down to the oak barrels in Sweden, in fact, within 150 kilometers of distillery, and they ended up pulling it off except for the yeast. The yeast actually comes from a separate source. So their original distillery was actually in the old Magnifier Ironworks. If you go to that building now, it says Magnifier Distillery on the side of it. But after a few years making the money, they built a new distillery as well. And everything, they went on the modern style. So a lot of stainless steel, not a lot of wood. The only thing that's not Swedish are the Forsyth stills. So these are the Forsyth is the guy who make the stills in Scotland, and that's where they got their stills from. They use Swedish oak as much as they can, but of course buy bourbon casks because they're arguably cheaper than the actual Swedish wood. And they have problems with temperature. It's too cold in the winter and too hot in the summer. It's not the consistencies that Scotland has. And so one of the tricks they do to age their whiskey is they use the old iron mine. They came with the license with the iron works. So they actually they cleared out a chunk of the mine and used it for barrel storage because temperature controls are a bit stronger. And they went on from there to actually build storage facilities all over Sweden, up above the Arctic Circle, down on some islands, so they could sort of mix and match. So very quickly, these guys took off as a pretty successful whiskey maker, including hiring a woman by the name of Angela D'Arizio as their master distiller starting in 2004. She was the expert and she really liked the experimentation they were doing. And so the whiskey, the particular version I'm talking about today, if you're going to go buy some Magnifier, because they make a lot of special editions, but the Brooks whiskey is their fundamental. It started coming out in 2010. The earliest have no age on them, which means they're 3 to 8 years old. They're relatively young. If you look hard, you can find older ones now. There's like a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old. 2011, they built a new distillery they called Gravity. They had this whole idea of building it as a tower. It's 37 meters tall, so over 100 feet high. And the idea was to lift the basics, the water, barley, and yeast, to the top of the structure and use gravity to work its way down into barrels at the bottom of the building, which then go to storage. The design of the distillery was to do experimentations with different barrel combinations, different aging strategies, and so forth, so they could make a variety of whiskeys. By 2013, they made their first peated whiskey called Svendruk. They still use the drying technique with electric heat, but then they introduce smoke to it in the finishing steps just to give a little bit of peat flavor to it. Mackmyra peaked in 2019. They were winning awards all over the place. You could also buy custom casking, so it became a very hip thing for a company to do like a tour of Mackmyra, and you'd get a 30-liter cask, lay it up yourself, and then it would go into storage until it was aged enough, and you could do your own custom bottling. Where the story takes a turn is when the pandemic hits. And I think it's because the company was highly leveraged, that Magnus realizes that they're in trouble. It's tough to run the company in the pandemic scenario. So he brings in a professional. He steps aside. This is the founder. Now he's been running the company for better part of 20 years. Steps aside to bring in a guy named Johan Larsson, who used to work for a company called Peak Performance as the CFO, to sort of optimize the company. It appears to not go well because within a year, D'Arazio, their master distiller, that has been around now for 15 years, immediately leaves. Although before she goes in 2021, her last product is called Intelligence, which I haven't been able to get my hands on, but it was a version of whiskey, quote, made with AI. So they collaborated with ThoughtWorks to build an AI model based on the data streams coming out of the Gravity Distillery with all their different aging and blending and barrel options to try and find an optimal whiskey. And that's what Intelligence is. And it's the last product that D'Arazio made before she left. So the pandemic obviously took a beating on the company. Their sales dropped off. Market shipping was limited. There was all these sorts of problems. And so this Johan Larsson didn't seem to deliver on his goals. Within a couple of years, he's out in 2023. He blames the pandemic. He also blamed the Ukraine war. I'm not quite sure why. I just read the press release. And the guy who takes over as acting CEO is the marketing director. So last year, there was their 25th anniversary. They did this big party. They had these special casks. Everything was exciting. And by August 24, they filed for bankruptcy. Now, this was a problem because everybody's a little stunned. How do you run out of money like this? But I think it's just they were over leveraged financially and were expecting constant growth and just were caught with their pants down on the pandemic and weren't able to get their refinancing done. But like most whiskey companies, they had a lot of barrels in storage, including all these custom barrelings they started back in 2019. So there was all these folks who had paid for these barrels who wanted them back, but now they were locked down into bankruptcy. And it's like, but wait, we paid for that barrel. And it turned out they didn't pay for the barrel. They paid for the liquor that was inside the barrel. The barrel was still owned by the company and that was controlled and they weren't allowed to access it. So there was a big row over that. And plus they were all under bond. So they hadn't paid tax on it. So you couldn't get it out without paying the tax on it. So it was locked up. And out of this comes, in the fall last year, this guy named Lennart Hero, who had joined the board back in 23 when Larsson left. So I think he came in. He's a fairly famous Swedish investor. He had a fair bit of money. And so he did some bridge financing in 23 and came in as a board member. And then when the bankruptcy thing goes down, he leaves. But by October, he comes back with another investment company called Number One Capital. They refinance. He brings it out of bankruptcy. They're generally cheering him as a hero, which is funny because that's his name. But it looks like it was a tactic that he wasn't happy with the way the company was running. But it's right now, if you go to the website, and I think you pulled this up for a moment there, Micah, the only thing it says on the website is, don't worry, we're going to make everybody whole. Just watch this. So the main website, there's nothing to see right now because of all of this turmoil. So I also provided a whiskey-based link because if you actually want to look at Brooks Whiskey, that's what it's about. Brooks Whiskey is a classic style of sherry cask whiskey. It hasn't got an age on it per se. It's probably an 8-year-old. They do Swedish oak with a sherry finish. It's about $60 US if you can find it at 40% ABV. And it's completely drinkable. It's a perfectly normal whiskey, which is impressive for a small company that hadn't been around for very long, and is now, struggling to come back out of it. And we'll see what happens. The experience of these young new age whiskey companies has been just up, right? Can't go wrong. And this is one of the rock stars of the new age that just has fallen on hard times for any number of reasons. And I think it'll have to come down to a lack of experienced leadership. Dan Donnell, I appreciate, stepped aside immediately when he knew it was over his head. They just got the wrong guy to fill in, and he couldn't find his way forward. The way you run a company when you're in trouble is different, and finding the right person for that is hard. And so leadership has been the problem, and they've taken a really good company and got it right heavily on the rocks. Hopefully they can pull themselves out. But it was not the story I originally intended to tell. I wanted to talk about Swedish whiskey while I was in Sweden, and all of a sudden this craziness came up.
Well,
how dare you?
I thought it was good. I don't think you intended it, but it was great. On the rocks. Anyway, thank you for the brown liquor pick of the week. Thank you for this episode of Windows Weekly. If you out there would like to catch the show as soon as it's put together very nicely by our one
it's well
Kevin
composed.
King. As soon as it's
for its age,
then you can head to twit.tv/WW, where you'll find the show notes for the show, as well as the latest episode. Subscribe to audio, subscribe to video. We do record the show live every Wednesday around about 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's where you can tune in to get the show. Also, another little reminder about Club Twit, twit.tv/ClubTwit, to help us continue to bring these shows to all of you. And now is the time where I say thank you to Richard Campbell for being here. Anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
We're all in good shape. Of course, .NET Rocks and Run As Radio doing their things, and I am working hard to finalize the details on the Fabric Conference, which will be the first week of April in Las Vegas. So if you're interested in Microsoft Fabric, the data analytics tools, we've got about 8,000 people coming to the MGM Grand. Go to Microsoft Fabric Community Conference to check it out.
Awesome. And Paul Thurrott, what about you, friend? Thurrott.com. Anything else?
Well, my wife and I are working on a book. We haven't talked about that too much, but if you go to eternalspringcdmx.com, you can find out about that there.
Beautiful. All right. If you want to check out my other shows, well, good luck. No, I'm just kidding. You can head to twit.tv. I've got many, so that's where you go. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for tuning in this week. Leo will be back next week.
You better bring some gems back.
I was going to say his chakras will be aligned.
Nice.
The crystals will be bringing energies.
Loaded down with alien technologies.
I can't wait to see the amethyst implanted in his nose. It'll be awesome.
Yeah. And so, yes, you can count on that next week. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Windows Weekly. Goodbye, everybody.